Every legal encounter leaves a trace. Every strict investigation pursues honesty. Comprehending your legal rights, establishing true justice.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement conducting a compliance check in this area. Need to see identification and proof of legal status.
PD, my driver's license in my wallet, my department ID is in the glove compartment.
The school parking lot at Oak Ridge Elementary was chaos when it happened. 3:45 p.m., a crisp October afternoon. The kind of Texas autumn that painted the sky amber and filled the air with fallen leaves and exhaust fumes from idling sedans. Veronica Davis had just pulled into the pickup line, still in her off-duty clothes, a cream-colored sweater, yoga pants, her son's dinosaur backpack tossed across the passenger seat. Tyler had barely climbed in, chattering about his science project, when 3 ICE agents stepped out from an unmarked van she hadn't seen lurking near the drop-off zone. Their body cameras blinked red, capturing what would become the most costly school run in American history. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this story. The lead agent moved first. His partner's one stocky with close-cropped hair, the other lean and younger fanned out in a tactical spread, their movements practiced and deliberate. Veronica caught it all in her rearview mirror before the knock came. The spacing, the hands hovering near belts, the body language of people who'd already written the ending before the scene began. 14 years wearing a badge had taught her to read threats in seconds. Federal agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, patches stark against their tactical vests. Moving toward her sedan like she'd already committed some unspoken crime. She understood where this would end before the lead agent's knuckles rapped against her window. Tyler sat beside her, mid-sentence about molecules and experiments, his voice bright with the kind of enthusiasm only third graders possessed. He stopped when he noticed the men approaching, his excitement dissolving into confusion that tightened the corners of his mouth. The lead agent gestured for her to lower the window. His expression carried no warmth, no recognition of the child in the passenger seat, no acknowledgement that this was a school, a safe place, a moment that should have remained ordinary. Veronica lowered the window halfway, kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. 14 years had also taught her that sudden movements around armed officers ended in headlines. The agent's voice arrived flat and bureaucratic, a script delivered without inflection. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, conducting a compliance check in this area. Need to see identification and proof of legal status. Procedure without thought, authority without question. Veronica kept her tone measured, calm, the same voice she used during traffic stops when civilians got nervous. Officer Veronica Davis, Houston PD. My driver's license is in my wallet. My department ID is in the glove compartment. She moved her hand slowly toward the center console, telegraphing every motion. The agent didn't step back, didn't acknowledge her words. Everyone claims something. Got documentation proving citizenship on you right now? The way he said it, citizenship carved the word into something accusatory. The burn started low in Veronica's chest. The familiar anger that came from being treated like this in her own city, her own neighborhood, outside her son's school. Wearing yoga pants and a sweater on a Tuesday afternoon. My driver's license has my information. My badge is right here. You can call my precinct. They'll verify everything. We'll verify after we establish identity and status. Step out of the vehicle, please. The please carried no politeness. It was a command wrapped in the thinnest veneer of civility. Veronica glanced at Tyler. His confusion had shifted into something worse, fear creeping into the edges of his wide eyes. She touched his knee once, gently, a silent promise that everything would be fine even though she knew it wouldn't be. She opened the door slowly, stepped out with her hands visible, chest level, palms open. The other 2 agents moved closer, flanking her, their presence designed to intimidate. The lead agent reached for her wrist before she could speak again. The cold metal of handcuffs snapped around her left wrist, then her right, the steel biting into skin as he twisted her arms behind her back with unnecessary force. Tyler's voice split the air, sharp, terrified. "Mom!" The sound gutted her. Other parents had started to notice. Engines cut off, car doors opened, phones lifted, cameras already recording. Voices rose in confusion, then outrage. Questions shouted toward the agents who ignored them all. "What are you doing? She's a cop. This is a school. What's happening?" The agents didn't respond. They moved her toward the unmarked van with clinical efficiency, hands gripping her arms, steering her like cargo. Tyler's cries followed her, raw and panicked, the kind of sound that would replay in her mind for months. Inside the van, Veronica forced herself to think, to catalog, lack of probable cause, racial profiling, excessive use of force, detention without justification. Every violation stacked neatly in her mind, sorted and filed with the precision she'd learned in another life, before the badge, before the uniform, before she traded the courtroom for the patrol car. She'd been a lawyer once. Not just any lawyer, one who'd won cases that made headlines, who'd dismantled arguments from federal prosecutors, who'd held agencies accountable for the exact kind of misconduct unfolding around her right now. She'd left that career to join the force, driven by the belief that change required working from inside the system. She'd kept her past quiet, her achievements understated, because being a black woman in law enforcement meant navigating suspicion and jealousy at every turn. But she hadn't forgotten how to fight. Outside, the parents had formed a loose barrier around the van. One woman pressed her phone to her ear, shouting into it, calling the precinct, demanding supervisors, threatening lawyers. Others blocked the van's path, their bodies and vehicles creating obstacles the agents couldn't easily move. The lead agent climbed into the driver's seat, frustration tightening his jaw. He barked orders into his radio, demanding backup, requesting verification. Veronica sat in the back, handcuffed and silent, her mind 3 steps ahead. She thought of her grandmother in Texas, who'd marched in the 60s, who'd faced down worse than this and survived. She thought of the cases she'd won, the precedents she'd set, the expertise she'd buried beneath a badge to avoid being seen as a threat. They'd just made her one anyway. An hour passed. The agents verified her identity through channels they should have used from the beginning. The handcuffs came off. No apology, no explanation, just a curt directive to leave. Veronica stepped out of the van, her wrists red and raw, and walked toward her son. Tyler ran to her, collapsing into her arms, his sobs shaking his small frame. She held him close, feeling the weight of every phone still recording, every witness who'd stood in defiance, every second of footage that would become evidence. The burn in her chest had transformed into something colder, sharper. Determination laced with the kind of precision only years in a courtroom could forge. They'd humiliated her, traumatized her child, dismissed her identity and her authority. Now they'd learn what happened when you underestimated someone who'd spent a career dismantling exactly this kind of injustice. The nightmare started that first night. Tyler woke 3 times, crying out for her, his small body rigid with fear each time headlights swept across his bedroom wall. Veronica sat beside his bed until dawn, one hand resting on his shoulder, the other scrolling through video files on her phone. 17 different recordings. 17 angles of her humiliation captured by parents who'd refused to look away. She watched herself step out of the sedan, hands raised, watched the handcuffs snap closed, watched Tyler's face crumple as they led her away. Each replay carved the details deeper into memory, the agent's dismissive gestures, their refusal to verify her credentials, the racial profiling so blatant it could have been a training video on what not to do. She'd already filed the official requests. Body camera footage from all 3 agents, incident reports, dispatch recordings. The bureaucracy moved slowly, but she knew how to expedite it. 14 years as a cop had taught her the system's pressure points. 20 years before that, as a lawyer, had taught her how to exploit them. By the end of the first week, she had everything. The attorney she hired, a sharp woman named Diane Porter, who specialized in civil rights cases, spread the documents across her conference table and shook her head. "This is extensive. You've built half the case already." Veronica didn't smile. Old habits. They filed against the U.S. government and the 3 agents individually. Unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of civil rights, Fourth Amendment breaches. The list stretched across pages, each claim supported by timestamps, witness statements, and video evidence that left no room for ambiguity. But it was during discovery that the shape of the case changed entirely. Veronica had requested all communications related to the compliance check, standard procedure. Most lawyers expected generic emails about patrol schedules and operational protocols. What arrived instead made her sit back in her chair, pulse quickening. Emails between the lead agent and a senior ICE official named Richard Bowman. Directives that used her name, suggestions to conduct targeted checks near locations she frequented. References to prior litigation cases she'd won years ago, before she'd ever worn a badge. Cases against Bowman himself. She remembered him, a supervisor who'd authorized a sweep that detained 37 U.S. citizens based solely on their appearance and neighborhood. She'd represented 5 of them, demolished his legal justification in court, cost the agency $2.3 million in settlements. He glared at her from the defense table, jaw tight, as the judge delivered the verdict. He'd remembered her too. The compliance check hadn't been random, it had been revenge. Diane read the emails twice, her expression shifting from disbelief to controlled fury. This is retaliation. He orchestrated this, targeted you specifically because you beat him in court. Veronica's response came quiet, cold. Then, we turned this into something bigger. The conspiracy evidence transformed their strategy. What had been a case about 3 agents' misconduct became an expose of systemic corruption within federal immigration enforcement. Veronica dug through old files, pulling obscure precedents from cases she'd won: Ramirez v. DHS, Thompson v. ICE, United States v. Kowalski, each one a building block that reinforced their legal foundation. Her legal team watched her work with growing respect. She didn't just assist, she led, mapping arguments, anticipating defense strategies, citing case law from memory with the precision of someone who'd lived in those trenches. The government's first settlement offer arrived 3 weeks later. $75,000. A non-disclosure agreement attached, dense with clauses designed to silence her permanently. Veronica rejected it within an hour. Diane warned her about the risks. Trials were unpredictable. Juries could be swayed by government lawyers who'd paint the agents as overworked civil servants following protocol. The verdict could be nothing. Or worse, it could validate their actions. But Veronica had spent 2 decades learning that sunlight was the best disinfectant. This needed to be public. The vendetta, the targeting, the systemic failures that allowed a vindictive official to weaponize federal authority against someone who dared challenge him. The case began attracting media attention. Local news ran segments. National outlets picked up the story. Civil rights organizations rallied support. Community members who'd witnessed the detention organized fundraisers for Tyler's college fund, small gestures that accumulated into something larger, proof that people were watching, waiting, ready to hold authority accountable. Do you believe federal agencies should require mandatory anti-bias training to prevent such targeted injustices? Drop yes or no in the comments and share why it matters for protecting families in everyday moments like this. Hit that like button if you're with Veronica's fight. And subscribe for more stories of resilience turning the tide. At the precinct, whispers followed her through hallways. Colleagues who'd known her as Officer Davis suddenly learned about Attorney Davis, the woman who'd taken down federal cases before most of them had graduated from the academy. Some respected it. Others resented it, questioned why she'd hidden that background, whether she'd thought herself too good for patrol work. Veronica ignored them. She balanced shifts with trial preparation, reviewing depositions between calls, mentoring Diane on cross-examination strategies during lunch breaks. Flashbacks surfaced unbidden. The decision to leave law. The belief that reform required proximity to the problem, that wearing a badge would let her change things from within. She'd downplayed her achievements, made herself smaller, because being a black woman in law enforcement meant every accomplishment invited scrutiny, jealousy, accusations of preferential treatment or arrogance. Now that quiet power was about to dismantle the people who'd mistaken her silence for weakness. Pretrial motions became a proving ground. Veronica attended every hearing, sitting beside Diane, passing notes that shifted their arguments in real time. During one deposition, Diane asked if she wanted to question a witness, a junior agent, who'd assisted in the detention. Veronica took the microphone. Her questions came surgical and relentless. She cited protocols the agent hadn't followed, precedents he didn't know existed, contradictions between his testimony and the body camera footage. Within 20 minutes, she dismantled his credibility so thoroughly that opposing counsel called for a recess. The defense team's perception shifted visibly. This wasn't just a victim seeking vindication. This was an adversary who understood the law better than they did. The trial date arrived like a storm building on the horizon. Veronica stood outside the courthouse steps, reporters shouting questions, cameras tracking her movements. She wore her dress uniform, Houston PD blues, badges polished, every detail regulation perfect. Tyler walked beside her, holding her hand, older now but still carrying shadows in his eyes. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, overflow crowds in the hallway, the weight of expectation pressed against the walls. Diane leaned close as they took their seats. Ready? Veronica looked toward the defense table, where the three agents sat beside their lawyers, expressions carefully neutral. Beyond them, in the back row, she spotted Richard Bowman, watching, waiting to see if his vendetta would cost him everything. She'd spent months preparing for this moment, building the case, gathering evidence, transforming humiliation into ammunition. Now it was time to show them exactly what happened when you underestimated someone who'd made a career of holding power accountable. The judge entered. The bailiff called the court to order, and Veronica Davis, officer and attorney, victim and advocate, prepared to deliver justice on her own terms. The courtroom lights hummed overhead, fluorescent and unforgiving, illuminating every face in the gallery as the trial commenced. Diane Porter began with the video evidence, 17 synchronized recordings projected onto screens that dominated the room. The jury watched Veronica step from her sedan, hands raised and compliant. Watched the handcuffs bite into her wrists. Watched Tyler's face dissolve into terror as his mother disappeared into the unmarked van. No one looked away. The footage continued. Parents shouting, phones lifted, bodies forming barriers around the van, ordinary people refusing to accept what they were witnessing. The audio captured Tyler's cries, raw and unfiltered, the kind of sound that bypassed logic and struck directly at the heart. Diane walked the jury through each violation methodically. Lack of probable cause, dismissal of proper identification, excessive force applied to a compliant subject. Racial profiling executed with such casual confidence it suggested routine rather than aberration. The defense's claims of standard procedure evaporated against the evidence, each timestamp and camera angle reinforcing what everyone could see: this had been targeted, deliberate, and unlawful. Then came Veronica's testimony. She took the stand in her dress uniform, badges catching the light, her posture straight, and her voice steady. She recounted the incident without embellishment or emotion, each detail delivered with the precision of someone who understood exactly how testimony became record, how record became precedent. The defense attorney attempted to rattle her during cross-examination, suggesting she'd overreacted, that she'd failed to cooperate fully, that her lawsuit was opportunistic rather than justified. Veronica responded by citing case law. Ramirez v. DHS established that visual identification of a badge constituted sufficient proof of law enforcement status. Thompson v. 24. ICE determined that handcuffing a compliant individual without articulable suspicion violated Fourth Amendment protections. United States v. Kowalski confirmed that racial profiling in immigration enforcement constituted actionable civil rights violations. She delivered each citation from memory, her tone conversational but unyielding, transforming the cross-examination into a lecture on constitutional law. The defense attorney sat down earlier than planned, but the conspiracy evidence shifted the trial's entire gravity. Diane introduced the emails communications between the lead agent and Richard Bowman that referenced Veronica by name, discussed her schedule, suggested locations for targeted checks. The gallery gasped audibly. Jurors leaned forward. Even the judge's expression tightened. Bowman's vendetta became undeniable. He'd weaponized federal authority against someone who'd beaten him in court years earlier, transforming immigration enforcement into a tool of personal retribution. The pattern extended beyond Veronica discovery had revealed similar targeting of other advocates, other attorneys who'd successfully challenged ICE operations. This wasn't isolated misconduct. It was systemic corruption. Veronica cross-examined a key witness herself, with Diane's permission and the judge's approval, a supervisor who'd approved the compliance check operation. She walked him through the authorization process, the criteria supposedly used to select targets, the oversight mechanisms that should have prevented personal vendettas from manifesting as federal action. Then she introduced an obscure precedent, Ellis v. Department of Justice, a case involving retaliatory investigations against whistleblowers. The parallels were unmistakable. The supervisor's testimony crumbled under the weight of his own contradictions, each answer digging the hole deeper. By the time Veronica finished, she'd transformed from victim to prosecutor, her legal expertise so evident that spectators whispered comparisons to legendary trial attorneys. A second settlement offer arrived mid-trial, $300,000. Another non-disclosure agreement, this one even more restrictive than the first. Veronica rejected it without hesitation. Diane had warned her again, juries were unpredictable, government lawyers skilled at deflection, verdicts uncertain, but Veronica understood something her attorney didn't. This trial wasn't just about compensation. It was about establishing a record, creating precedent, ensuring that the next person targeted by vindictive officials would have legal ammunition to fight back. Justice required visibility. The deliberations lasted 5 days, long enough that doubt crept in, whispers circulating about potential compromise verdicts or hung juries. Veronica spent the time at home with Tyler, helping with homework, reading before bed, rebuilding the routines that trauma had fractured. When the jury returned, the courtroom filled within minutes. The foreman stood. The judge asked for the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The words landed like thunder. The jury found the agents and the government liable for unlawful detention, racial profiling, civil rights violations, and excessive force. More significantly, they acknowledged the conspiracy, the deliberate targeting orchestrated by Bowman, the systemic failures that enabled retaliation against advocates. The damages, $13.7 million. The courtroom erupted. Applause rolled through the gallery despite the judge's calls for order. Reporters rushed toward exits, phones already lifted, headlines forming in real time. Diane gripped Veronica's hand, her eyes bright with tears she'd held back for months. Veronica sat still, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. Not just a personal vindication, but a precedent. A message sent to every federal agency, every official who'd considered weaponizing authority against critics, every system that operated on the assumption that victims lacked the expertise or resources to fight back. The assumption had been wrong. In the aftermath, Veronica retired from the Houston Police Department. 14 years of service culminated in a quiet ceremony, a handshake from the chief, and a plaque that summarized her career in polished phrases that captured none of its complexity. She relaunched her law practice within a month. The legal aid clinic opened 6 months later, funded partially by the settlement and partially by donations that poured in from across the country. It specialized in profiling cases, civil rights violations, immigration enforcement abuses, the exact injustices that had defined both her careers. Young attorneys lined up to work there, drawn by the promise of meaningful litigation and the mentorship of someone who'd beaten the system at its own game. Veronica lobbied for federal reforms, testifying before congressional committees about the need for mandatory anti-bias training, independent oversight of immigration enforcement, and protections for advocates who challenged agency misconduct. Some representatives listened, others didn't, but the testimony became part of the record, another layer of precedent for future battles. Tyler healed slowly. Therapy helped. Time helped more. He grew interested in law, asking questions about cases, sitting in on clinic meetings when homework allowed. Veronica watched him absorb the work, recognizing echoes of herself at that age, the same hunger for justice, the same refusal to accept systems that operated without accountability. She thought often about her grandmother in Texas, about the civil rights struggles that had shaped her family's history, about the resilience required to reclaim agency in a world designed to deny it. Her own story had become part of that continuum, proof that expertise could be hidden but never erased, that power underestimated was power preserved for the right moment. Years later, Veronica drove past Oak Ridge Elementary on her way to the clinic. A small plaque had been installed near the parking lot entrance, commemorating the community solidarity that had forced the agents to release her that October afternoon. Parents still gathered there each day, picking up their children, ordinary moments unfolding without incident. Most of them, anyway. Veronica kept her phone charged, her legal knowledge sharp, her commitment to the work unwavering, because justice wasn't a verdict delivered and forgotten. It was an ongoing practice of endurance and action, a legacy built one case at a time, protecting future generations from the abuses that had defined hers. She'd turned her humiliation into precedent, her trauma into reform, her underestimation into systemic change. And somewhere in a federal building, officials now thought twice before targeting advocates who'd beaten them in court, because they'd learned, finally, that some people don't just survive injustice, they dismantle it.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.
Truth is a continuous pursuit, and awareness is your best defense. Thank you for watching and championing global transparency.